Let's start right now. So my question right now is, and I wish I was in that press conference, and John Hilsenrath will be on in about 20 minutes, and we're going to ask him some of the questions that the reporters should be asking Ben. And the one question I want to ask Ben is, Ben, what are you afraid of? I want to know what you're afraid of. CNBC, all the channels out there that cover business. We have person after person after person. Buy side, sell side, upside, downside. How's the economy? Economy's great. What about stocks? You got to buy them. What if they break? You got to buy the dips. What's wrong with the economy? I don't hear these people saying anything's wrong with the economy. So what's wrong, Ben? Why can't we get out of crisis management mode? There's always going to be something. Let me think. ISM's under 50. Oh, my God, we can't pull in QE. Or unemployment. You know, this unemployment thing really gets a spur under my saddle. I remember a point when I was talking about labor force participation rates before the election. You know, when facts really matter and people vote for their leaders. No, the unemployment rate isn't really going down because people aren't really getting jobs. What did I hear from the Fed chairman? Crickets. Crickets. Now that he ties it to the unemployment rate, boy, everybody wants to talk about that factor, because if the unemployment rate goes up, that may be a good thing. If it goes down, that may not be a good thing. Why didn't we have all this information then? So why can't we take away the QE? I don't get it. What are we afraid of? Do we have a Fed that operates like a day trader, where every little gyration in the market, every 10 minutes is all that matters? If you pull it away and the stock market goes down, where does it say in the Constitution that some form of the government has to guarantee stocks go up or guarantee that you have a house? They don't. Where have we gone off the rails? Enough is enough. 2 Fed chairmen, is that enough? It's enough. I would like one reporter to say, Mr. Chairman, what are you afraid of in the U.S. economy? Because no matter how he squeezes that water balloon, no matter how much smoke comes from that curtain, in the end, they're going to have to deal with a reality. And the longer you put it off, think being a parent, the worse the consequences are.
We got Rick Santelli on the show now, the man himself, the man behind the rant that we played in the first hour. Hey, Rick, that had to be one of the best rants you've given on CNBC yet. Hats off to you, my friend.
Well, it's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me. I guess to create a bit of a pun, I was a bit fed up yesterday.
Yeah, you know, and what do you think about what Ben Bernanke said? He basically said, we have no idea what we're going to do. In fact, if we're wrong about the economy, which they probably are because they're always wrong, we might actually increase the size of QE and instead of admitting that the QE didn't work.
I'm in agreement with you. I think that, like many policymakers, I do think Ben's heart's totally in the right place. I just think the policies aren't working. The relationship between the policies and unemployment and the general positives we look for in job creation in the economy aren't there. They're not correlating to the extent they would have you believe. But I would say this. I think even if you take a flagstone, Peter, and put it on a nice geranium, it still may grow. I think the point is the markets will always find a way to be the markets, even when they're somewhat managed. And I think the response after yesterday's Fed statement and press conference shows me that the markets are kind of getting back to being the markets. Now, of course, they're not 100%, but rates moving up, the stock market getting dinged a bit, but not necessarily horribly, is the beginning of the markets coming back to a point where we can start to maybe read better signals into what it's telling us about.
Yeah. Although the stock market decline may just be getting underway, but, you know, how can Ben Bernanke, he's hanging his hat of a recovery on the housing market, yet mortgage rates are now exploding. They're likely to head much higher in the weeks and months ahead. I think the housing recovery is already over, and we're going down to new lows in the housing market. So whatever he thinks he created with all the cheap money, it's unraveling before he even has a chance to withdraw it.
Pete, you can squeeze a water balloon any way you want, but it always pops out somewhere else. And I agree with the influence of the Fed pushing rates lower has had a soothing influence on the housing market. But I also think there is something to be said about entrepreneurialism and how many corporations and private equity has amassed businesses that are buying foreclosed properties, turning them into rentals. There are some positives there. And I would leave with the following thought. The first home I ever bought was in the early 80s. My first mortgage mortgage was 15.75%. There were decent housing markets in the 70s, 80s, and 90s when rates were multiples of where they are today. So it isn't only about rates. It's about the consumer. It's about the middle class. It's about a job. And it's about getting back to free markets.
But, Rick, we were a different economy back then. We had a lot less debt. Home prices were lower. I think a lot of these spec homes that were bought out, they're not going to be able to find tenants. They're going to have for sale signs on them pretty soon, and there's not going to be any buyers. Hey, one final question, though. You're on CNBC. You're in the middle of all this. Why is there so much complacency? Why is nobody worried about the backup in rates, worried about the housing market, worried that this correction may turn into a new bear market in the stock market?
Because this is a one-off. As Peter Fisher, head of the Dallas Fed, is a guest on my show about a month ago. We're in an area, we're in a universe we've never been in before, and now it's up to Ben to try to get us back to earth. This is something unique. It's a grand experiment. All these variables are unknowns. It's very difficult to get a GPS.
Yeah, but why wouldn't people be a little bit more nervous? Look at the sell-offs around the world. Look at what the global markets are doing. Every market around the world has been hammered.
China. Look at China. Look at the Shibor, the Shanghai offered bank rate. Yes, everything is moving in a correlated manner with rates up and equities down. But I will say this, Peter. In the end, it's better to have the reality, and I think we are getting back to it. Is there going to be a lot of uncertainty in the future? Absolutely. But in order to really find the type of healing that I know you want and you talk to your listeners every day about, we need to get a solid footing to end up getting a good jump.
Yeah, you asked the question, what is Ben Bernanke afraid of in your rant? It's reality. That's what he's afraid of. He's afraid that people will see through the fantasy that he's concocted with all of his cheap money and see the reality for what it is. And that's we're in worse shape than we were in before this experiment began. And when it wears off, we're going to find that we've dug ourselves into a much deeper hole. And now we have a bigger problem to solve. And what is the Fed going to do about it, Rick? The same old thing?
Well, and that's the point, that I think it's some spot in the future that we need to really put pressure on our elected officials to alter the mandate of the Federal Reserve. $3.4 trillion balance sheet's awfully big, and I think we need to think about whether we want to enable the Federal Reserve to be able to repeat this in the future.
Yeah, and if you think it's big now, Rick, they basically committed to keep expanding it until it's at least $4.5 trillion, and who knows. After that, I think they're going to keep on growing it. But, hey, Rick, I really appreciate you coming on. But what I appreciate more is the outstanding job that you do on CNBC, because somebody's got to talk sanity to Steve Leisman. And they don't really let me on too much, at least not on the shows with him. So I need you out there representing our point of view. So thanks very much for doing what you do, and thanks for stopping by.
Thanks, Peter. Thank you much.